Hello, everyone. This is Hector from Assertive, and welcome to our fourth and final installment of the Privileged Access Without the Pain video series. Before we start, I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Yes, I broke my nose. No, this is not the result of a failed PAM deployment discussion. Although, honestly, some architectural workshops can get very rowdy. But let's talk about privileged access. In this series, we have looked at how traditional PAM works, where it adds value and where it becomes difficult to scale. Now, we're going to compare two different approaches to privileged access security. One, traditional credential-centric PAM, the PAM that we all know, and identity-centric privileged access control. The goal here is not to say that one is better than the other or that one is right and one is wrong. Nothing whatsoever. The goal is to understand where each model fits, what problem they solve, and how organizations can achieve essential outcomes in a more practical way. Does this ring a bell? Join me and let's have a conversation. Traditional PAM, as you know, was originally designed around a relatively small number of highly privileged human administrators. But modern environments look very different today. Today we have cloud admins, we have service accounts, automation, machine identities, SaaS platforms, and distributed infrastructure. The privileged access problem has expanded dramatically, and that creates a challenge. Trying to vault and broker every privileged identity becomes operationally difficult very, very quickly. Traditional PAM applies controls primarily around credentials and sessions. Easy concept. The idea is protect the credential, broker the session, and tightly control the execution. This model works well for highly sensitive accounts, shared privileged credentials, and heavily regulated environments. But it also introduces complexity. You now need to manage the vault, connectors, the onboarding, session infrastructure, and operational workflows. And that becomes harder as environments become more distributed. Traditional PAM deployments usually focus heavily on the tier 0 systems. That includes domain admins, core infrastructure administrators, highly privileged operational accounts. And that absolutely makes sense. These are the crown jewels of the environment. This model delivers a strong protection for highly sensitive systems through vaulting, session control, and a tightly governed privileged access workflows. But modern environments have expanded far beyond this original operating model. The challenge is that privileged access risk now extends far beyond tier 0. Today, organizations also need visibility and control across developers, cloud admins, service accounts, operational support teams, DevOps platforms, and hybrid infrastructure. Many of these identities still hold significant privilege, but often sit outside the strongest PAM control boundaries. This is where identity-centric controls become strategically important. Instead of applying controls only at credential retrieval or session initiation, controls are enforced more broadly through identity governance, multi-factor authentication, authentication policies, just-in-time access, and runtime access enforcement. This allows organizations to extend meaningful protection across a much wider identity surface. And importantly, this is not about replacing PAM. It's about extending privileged access protection beyond the top of the pyramid. The identity-centric model approaches the problem in a very different way. Instead of focusing primarily on protecting credentials, it focuses on controlling identities, authentication, and administrative execution environments. The control point moves earlier in the access flow. Instead of waiting until credential retrieval or session initiation, controls are enforced directly at authentication time. This reduces standing privilege, limits lateral movement, and extends protection across a much broader identity surface. These models are not mutually exclusive. They simply apply control at different points. Traditional PAM focuses on credential sessions. Identity-centric security focuses on identity and authentication pathways. In practice, many organizations will use both. The important thing is understanding that where your primary control plane sits is in identity. That's the most important thing. Now, this is the important takeaway. Essential 8 defines control objectives. Essential 8 does not mandate a vault, a bastion, or a specific PAM platform. The real requirement is reducing privilege access risk. That's what we have to focus on. Both models can contribute to that outcome. The difference is how the controls are implemented and how well they scale operationally. The goal shouldn't be vault every account. The goal should be apply the right controls at the right layer and for the right risk. For many organizations, the most practical path is start with identity and authentication, then selectively introduce traditional PAM controls where they provide additional value. That creates a much more scalable and operationally sustainable security model. If there is one thing I'll encourage organizations to rethink, it's this. Privileged access security is no longer just a credential management problem. Modern attacks increasingly target identity, authentication pathways, standing privilege, and lateral movement opportunities, which means effective privileged access security needs to operate much more broadly across these environments. Traditional PAM still absolutely has a role, especially for tier 0 systems, high-sensitive infrastructure, and shared privilege accounts. But for many organizations, particularly those operating hybrid environments with limited operational resources, identity-centric controls provide a much more scalable way to extend protection across the broader privilege and the broader identity surface. The key is not choosing one model versus the other. The key is understanding where controls should be applied, how broadly they can scale, and how to reduce risk without introducing unnecessary operational complexity. That's really what this series has been about, looking at privileged access through the lens of identity. We really hope that you found these video sessions useful, and we are more than happy to have a conversation around the challenges that you may have trying to achieve essential 8 outcomes or trying to enforce privileged access, because the risk profile that has been defined for organization requires you to establish some mechanism to control privileged access. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day.